Hey everyone, Tony D with another hot take. This should be a short one. Before I get started, though, I forgot to mention something in my previous rant about the crisis, and that is there's a hot mic video going around. I'll put a link in the description. Someone linked it. Thank you, by the way. Some commenter linked it in my comments, and it's very interesting. Basically, someone on a hot mic, one of the newscaster, says, "Oh, you don't have to wear a mask. It's not that big a deal. We were all vaccinated anyway, and it's only 0.012% or something like that. It's not even the flu, dude." So these idiots keep getting caught on a hot mic talking like that, man. When meanwhile they're going on the news saying, "Oh, we're all gonna die." Not good. Not good. Anyhow, the hot take is going to be Star Wars toys. Yes, I know. It's a weird subject for me, although it's comic book adjacent. But when I was working at the comic book store, I also worked. The guy who owned the comic book store owned a numismatics store as well that had all sorts of collectibles, mostly coins. And we were doing at that time the hot collectible item was old Star Wars toys. Now these were the original toys because at that time, yeah, that was the late '90s, and they were getting super hot because they were gearing up for the new movies, which at that time were the prequels, and Lucas was directing them. So everybody was going to collect their toys again. So for a while there was a window of opportunity where you could really make some money. You could go to a yard sale and pick up old Star Wars toys all day long for nothing, and then roll them over for a pretty penny. Within a few months, that ground to a halt because there were a lot of people who would not part with them or got wind that they were worth money, and then you could forget it. And then everybody was putting it up on eBay, but the prices went right through the roof because these were vintage toys. They were 20 years old. Perfect nostalgia time period, about 20 years. And the weird thing about them was the smaller the accessory, usually the more valuable it was. So on the Millennium Falcon set, what do you think are the most valuable pieces on there? For those of you who don't know toys, it turns out the gas mask. They came with little plastic gas masks for the figures. They were made of clear plastic. I remember seeing those as a kid and going, "What the hell are these? Are these part of the packaging? You should probably just throw them away." Well, it turns out they're very valuable because a lot of people just did or didn't keep them or didn't know what the hell they were. But for the scene in Empire when they get out into, and it turns out they're in the monster on the asteroid, that's when they had the gas. It was only for one scene. They had a little gas thing on their face. So those were valuable. The guns were kind of valuable too because people lost them. For the Slave One ship, which was Boba Fett's ship, the valuable piece, people kept the ship. People kept the Han Solo and Carbonite, but what they always lost was the door to the ship, and that was worth more money than the entire Slave One because people kept losing the door. The door would fall off. I'm not sure why. I guess that was a design thing, or because you wanted to be able to push the carbonite hand in there and close the lid, and then the door would just fall off. So there were all sorts of weird things like that, and there were particular, IG-88 was a valuable character, and there's a few other characters, alternate. There was the infamous Boba Fett jetpack character, which could only be found. It was done in a giveaway right before they banned toys that shot little plastic pieces, and there was only a few of them that actually work. And the rumor was that the rest of them they glued them in. They glued in the little piece in the back that shoots out. But then some people said that was an urban myth. It wasn't true, and who knows? I didn't follow it that closely, but the toys were a phenomenon at that time. Well, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because the current toys are not. The current batch of Star Wars movies, the story going around the internet now, the toys aren't selling apparently. And not only that, they're not even making a bunch of them. They had tons of toys back in the day. The original Star Wars toys were so popular, they reissued them. And they did different sizes, and they were constantly reissuing them, and they couldn't wait. This batch of movies, nobody wants the toys. Who wants a toy of, say, broken down Luke Skywalker? I know I don't want that toy. I'd throw that in the trash or smash it into a million pieces. Who wants a toy of Rey, the Mary Sue, who just, basically as a character shat on the entire series? I wouldn't want that toy either. Who wants a toy for some of these characters that did almost nothing in the movie other than sort of stand there in, quite frankly, movies that were subpar? But this all goes back to a very interesting take on it, and I'm not the only one who thinks this. Also, Dichter von Doomcock also said this, and I agree. I think it's true. It was all about the story. See, story drives everything. If you don't have a good story, it's pointless. Yeah, the prequels, they came off the rested laurels of the original movies and did very well. But that's only because the original movies were so popular. They were insanely popular. You just can't imagine how insanely popular Star Wars was in its day. I mean, it was the thing for everyone. Everyone, all walks of life. That first movie, everybody saw in the theaters for over a year. Over a year. You can't imagine it because the world is different now. It would have played on TV. But back then, you couldn't get movies on TV until long after they were done, and then they transfer them over to TV and cut them up and put commercials in between. But that took forever. This movie had legs, and people went to see it again and again and again and again, and they loved it. They loved it. They talked about it, and then they launched some Marvel comics, and they launched books, and it was a phenomenon. They're not going to do that for these new movies. They've killed it, in my view. And they've killed it because they didn't care about the story. They didn't hire, they had all the money in the world to spend on the best writers that money could buy. Literally, you could have gotten any writer in the world to write those Star Wars scripts. Any writer in the world would have been happy to take that gig. You could have gotten a Hugo Award-winning science fiction writer you could have gotten William Gibson. You could have gotten, if you wanted to go in a weird direction, you could have gotten Stephen King. Anybody. There's not a writer on this planet that wouldn't have been happy to take that enormous paycheck and write an amazing, and not just a good, but an amazing screenplay and a story. But instead, ego. Instead, we've got ego, and that's what it is. Ego and marketing. Oh, no. We know best. We know best. Remember when Daredevil, they made that movie Daredevil? I know a little behind the scenes on Daredevil. They brought in Frank Miller. I think he did a cameo in the movie because it was based on a lot of, Frank made Daredevil. He was the Chris Claremont of Daredevil, in my view. Daredevil was kind of a character, and then he came in and turned it into something amazing. I heard through a friend who was on the set, they basically treated him like, oh, don't worry, we've changed a few things, but it's for the movie, you understand. And they went ahead and just butchered it, in my view. Now, you can look at Frank Miller's directed movies and say, well, it's not like he would have had great ideas. That's true. But people's creative thing changes according to various things. That maybe they corrupted him, and that's why his the Spirit didn't do as well as it should have. But Frank certainly knew what he was doing in the world of comics, and he certainly knew he certainly was on point during that era, and it would have behooved the movie makers to follow that story. And they didn't really, and it was Ben Affleck as Daredevil. By the way, it was so weird. He's played Daredevil and Batman. So strange. Um, but this is why the Star Wars toys aren't selling ultimately. This is why Disney and big time Hollywood producers just don't get it. I've talked to these guys. You can talk until you're blue in the face, and they just don't understand story because they're not writers. They're money guys. They think, like a lot of people, oh, I've written things before. I wrote an email just now. I've done tweets. I'm a writer too. No, you're not. You need actual writers with actual credits who have been doing it a long time. It would have been better for them just to hire Lucas. And now, look, I'm not saying that writers can't be self-indulgent or bad or wrong. That they could write something great that isn't commercially viable. That's an issue. But when you get, the current system is so screwed up because everybody's vying for that screenwriter credit, but nobody's really a screenwriter. They just want the money. And there's no system in place anymore to bring up writers, to train them, to do anything other than, marginalize them as much as possible. Ghostwriting is rampant in Hollywood. I mean, it's rampant. They'll hire a writer. Yeah, you'll never get the credit. They're perfectly fine with that. And the thing is, that's wrong because ultimately those talents come to the forefront, and then you regret that decision later when they're famous. But there are writers out there who need the work and would have done a great job on Star Wars. And the people they hire in Hollywood, first off, they're in LA, and I think LA does a lot to grind people down and just put them in the wrong frame of mind. They're constantly in meetings. They're constantly overdeveloping everything they do. That is my main problem with everything coming out of Hollywood these days. It's overdeveloped. It's so developed to the point of absurdity where everything is overproduced and overwrought, and it's just not simple anymore. It just, it used to be like for a budget, even on a movie like Star Wars, there was a limit. They would just say, well, we'll shoot this thing in the desert, and that'll be Desert Planet. That'll be Tatooine. We'll add a couple of touches, but we won't go nuts. Now it's like every rock has a special unit that renders rocks in CGI to make sure that they pop on the screen. And meanwhile, and they spend like $1 million just making sure the rocks are visible on every frame in the movie. And meanwhile, the screenwriter gets screwed. Meanwhile, you've hired 11 screenwriters over the course, and now nobody can make sense of this script because it's been rewritten so many times, because the actors want to determine some things and the director wants, the director should have a hand in it, but the studio steps in. It's awful when the studio steps in. 9 times out of 10 they don't know what they're doing. Now, granted, when a movie is bombing, when a movie tests badly, maybe if it tests so badly, they can turn a total piece of crap into something that will at least limp to the box office respectably. But they can easily do the opposite. There's a famous story with Blazing Saddles. Mel Brooks, I believe they tested it, and they said, oh, this is the most hilarious movie ever, Mel, but, we can't show it. We got all these changes we want you to make. And Mel didn't make any of the changes, as legend has it, and you had this amazing movie. Mel Brooks is a genius. The Blazing Saddles is his best movie by far. If you've never seen it, it's just from beginning to end. It's one of the most perfect comedies ever made, and you wouldn't have gotten that if he had listened to the studio. Mel Brooks was a comedy legend, and he was in his prime. And thank God, he didn't listen to the studio suits who wanted to do something trendy and cool and make sure the audiences love it. Now we have trendy and cool Hollywood execs that are following this woke trend right down a rabbit hole. And they're destroying themselves. They're getting woke and going broke. and they don't even believe in this shit. So it's time, Hollywood, begging you, stop killing yourselves. Hire writers. Hire people that understand writers. I can read stuff and understand if it's good. And look, you got to set a high bar for this stuff. A high bar, and it can't just be credits. It can't just be box office, because your marketing can work magic. You can make you can polish your marketing teams can polish a turd, and that is a problem. You need someone in there to say no to you. This doesn't work. You have to go back and reshoot this. And as soon as some people in Hollywood, one of the studios, figures that out, I think they will pull ahead of the competition in a major way and make more money. And you'll see franchises like this, new franchises, completely new. Look, I can create a new franchise for you every day. Literally every day I could create that for you. It's not a problem. This stuff is fun. It's a real writer can do that. This idea that you're going to just take the old stuff and keep churning it out, you're seeing what the result is, and it's tainting everything. It's tainting your brand. It's killing your brand. There was a time where Disney's brand was basically in the trash. It's headed that way. And you're killing the brand, your own marketing. To make $2 today, it's gonna cost you $20 tomorrow. So stop. Hire some writers. It won't cost much. It won't even cost much. That's the ironic thing. It won't even cost you that much money in the wider scheme of things. You drop hundreds of thousands of dollars on lame projects and apps and the bells and whistles that no one cares about, and you can't even pay a handful of writers to develop some good quality content for you when you can't listen to them. It's just sad to me. It's tragic. And but I can't say I'll be sorry to see companies like that go, because that's the evolution. That's the free market at work. So that's Star Wars toys for you.